On this summer edition of Hockey Inside Out, the panel discusses the David Reinbacher draft. Was it the right move, or should he have gone forward? And also, with the acquisition of Alex Newhook, what will he bring to the roster? And finally, the rating of Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes so far with their draft and offseason acquisitions, plus the bonus questions of this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out. Welcome back to a special summer edition of Hockey Inside Out. I'm your host, Moe Khan, alongside Andrew Berkshire, Stu Cowan, Rick Green. Gentlemen, you guys look relaxed and tan, unlike the Montreal Canadiens, who just had their draft and free agent frenzy. Let's start off with David Reinbacher. He was the first pick by the Montreal Canadiens last week in Nashville. Was it the right move, or should they have gone forward, considering what the fans' anger was towards this draft pick?
Well, I mean, let's face it. Give this guy, this young man, a little bit of time. I mean, Ken Hughes went with what he said was the best player available, and according to his meetings and discussions, this was the kind of kid that they wanted to select. Good character kid, with all the potential to fit into the mix of what he has there on the blue line. Good size. Very mobile, smart one with the puck. Time will tell, and it's always easy to second guess when these selections are made. And Ken Hughes and company, they try and do things, for the long term. And I think that this young man is a quality kid that's going to become a good player. But let's not judge him too early. Let's see how he handles himself. And according to the development camp news, he's doing all the right things right now, and very excited to be part of the Montreal Canadiens organization. So let's see where this goes in the future. Hoping sooner than later, but he has all of the skill set to become a really good defenseman.
I think there's a lot of anger in the fan base right now, and a lot of it, I don't think it necessarily has to do with hockey playing ability or future of the organization. It just comes down to, philosophically, a lot of fans want that high-end 100-point forward that the Canadiens haven't had since, Mats Naslund at the end of the 80s there, or really, truly a star player in terms of, across the league, Guy Lafleur. It's been a very, very long time for the Montreal Canadiens. And I do think that in the end, they did make a mistake here in terms of passing over Matvei Michkov, because he is so good, because his draft profile essentially compares to first ballot Hall of Famers. But making a mistake doesn't mean that they made a bad pick. In and of itself, David Reinbacher is a very, very good player who has number one defenseman potential. And I think we saw during the little development camp there, he's not allergic to offense, right? A lot of people have decided that he's a defensive defenseman because of his numbers in the Swiss League last year. But if you look at his numbers in the Swiss League compared to other players his age, he's actually quite adept offensively, and he wasn't given the chance to contribute offensively as much as he will be this year or going forward as a Montreal Canadien in the future. So it's not a bad pick per se. It's that the opportunity cost of not taking a player like Matvei Michkov is a lot higher than not taking a guy like David Reinbacher. There are number one, number two defensemen in the NHL who are traded or signed in free agency relatively often. You don't really get superstar forwards moving teams. It doesn't really happen. So passing over Matvei Michkov, I think, sparked a lot of anger in the fan base, even if in the end they may be very happy with David Reinbacher in a couple of years here. It's just that now I think people know they're not coming out of this rebuild right away, because they still need that elite forward. Cole Caulfield can score 50 goals, but he's not an all-tools superstar forward. Nick Suzuki has scored 60 points plus on terrible teams with very little help. He might gust up to 70, maybe even 80 points in his prime years, but he's not a game-breaking talent up front. The Canadiens just don't have that in terms of the guys like Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. So not getting that, I understand the pain and the suffering that the fan base has gone through, these last couple of years. Getting out of that and the disappointing rookie season from Slavkovsky, it seems like it was all for not that much. But now they have to look at the next couple of years and say, well, we're probably still going to be pretty bad and take other top-end players at the top of the draft. They really don't have a choice to try to move out of this losing section of time for the rebuild. They have to get that elite forward still. So I get the disappointment, but David Reinbacher is going to be a very good player. And if you saw at development camp playing with Lane Hudson, those two already had chemistry. Lane Hudson has, a free, you can go with David Reinbacher. And he is astonishing what he can do with the puck. And Reinbacher at 18 looks pretty darn good too.
Yeah, that was the interesting thing in development camp was watching those two be paired together. They had a lot of give and goes going, as you mentioned, Andrew. Reinbacher has some offensive ability also. He's a really mature kid. Like for everything he went through from the really hateful comments he was getting on social media, he handled everything well. A really well-spoken, polite, nice kid and mature kid. As I wrote in a column, I just thought it was a strange pick for basically the reasons you mentioned, Andrew, for a team that has struggled offensively and on the power play for so long. Nick Suzuki had 66 points last season to lead the Canadiens. That was 73rd in the NHL. They haven't had a star offensive player. Cole Caulfield might be that goal scorer, but he hasn't played a complete NHL season yet. But the pass on Michkov, I know there were a lot of red flags with him concerning the situation with his father, mysteriously dying in Russia, the war going on over there, the fact that Kent Hughes said one of the biggest red flags, they hadn't been able to scout him in person. They'd only seen him on video. But if there were so many red flags to scare them off, I think Ryan Leonard would have been a good pick. Kid from the U.S. National Development Program, the same as Cole Caulfield, the same as Austin Matthews, the same as all these guys, young guys you see coming into the NHL with offensive ability like crazy. Leonard's another one. He had 51 goals and 94 points in 57 games last year with the U.S. National Development Team. So if they were so worried about Michkov, if there were red flags there that said maybe we should stay away from this guy, to me, Leonard would have been the pick. And again, Reinbacher, Kent Hughes said he sees him as like a number 2 D-man. He's not going to be like a power play guy, but he's that big, solid, steady defenseman, like a Rick Green type of guy. But for me, for a team, they haven't had a 40-goal scorer since Vinny Danfus in 93-94. They haven't had a player in the top 10 in scoring since Mats Naslund was playing with Rick in 1985-86. That's a long time. And this is a fan base. It's a minority of people on social media who go crazy and do stupid things or comments. But I understand the frustration for just a regular Habs fan who isn't crazy like that. Just that they want offense. They want to be entertained. Cole Caulfield's the first exciting player this team has had in a long time, bring people out of their seats. And I think they wanted another one. I think the Canadiens need another one. Like, there's no guarantee Cole Caulfield's going to score 40 goals in the NHL. We don't know if he's going to get hurt again. We don't know what's going to happen. But the path where they were at a number 5 pick, the opportunity to get a real star offensive player, I think it was a mistake, and we might be proven wrong in the future moving forward. But again, I think the Michkov or Leonard would have helped offensively, would have helped the power play, and those are 2 really big problems, and they've been big problems for the Canadiens for such a long time. Kent Hughes said a lot of it weighed on Reinbacher being a right-hand shot, and I hope that wasn't the difference between the deciding factor between taking him or one of the offensive guys, just the fact that he was a right-hand shot. That's really drafting for need instead of just taking the best player available, and we've seen that doesn't usually work well in the NHL draft.
Yeah, and I think there's also, if people look at Matvei Michkov and some of the scouting reports that were out before the draft came out, and the way that his game is described, the way that you can see it on highlight packs and watching his games, God, does he ever look like a perfect player for Marty St. Louis? Mm-hmm. The reads are so good. So it's tough, I think, to swallow that. I think that's the big thing about this offseason in general, right? There's a lot of people who are upset that in the end, we may be proven wrong and that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon made the right choice here. David Reinbacher could be the next Victor Hedman, and that's something that every team does need. But it's not a summer that people get excited about, right? When you're addressing defense and goaltending in the draft, and you pay out 2 not high picks, but relatively high picks for Alex Newhook, who hasn't. We'll talk about him later, but he hasn't really hit in the NHL yet. It's a tough sell, I think, for a fan base that wanted to come into this summer after a really tough second half of the season, excited to go into next year. And now I think people are so focused on Slavkovsky not having a great rookie year. You're not getting a lot of offense from the guy that you picked in the top 5. Where's it coming from? Is Cole Caulfield going to stay healthy? Can Suzuki take the next step where he can be a top line forward and not get pounded defensively at the same time as keeping his scoring up? so far in his career, he's been either great defensively or great offensively. He hasn't put it all together as a complete package yet. So there is frustration for sure. However, I know that there are some people who heavily scouted David Reinbacher who are very insistent that he was not just the best pick at 5, that he was the second best player in this draft after Connor Bedard, which I'm not sold on at this point, but I see what they're talking about in terms of his steadiness, how well he reads things, how well he jumps into plays. I think that there is a development path for Reinbacher that looks very enticing. It's just a tough sell to the fan base.
I mean, Lane Hatson was by far the most fun player to watch at the development camp. He was like anybody. I know you were there, Andrew, with your son. Like he was just fun to watch, making people go, "Wow." Reinbacher didn't do that. I mean, he was okay. I mean, The thing with Reinbacher also, you got to remember what he's been through since he got there. You know, it's been a crazy few weeks for him. I'm sure he slept like maybe 4 or 5 hours a night. There was times at the development camp where he looked exhausted, and that's understandable why he was. But again, the Canadiens have been trying to find somebody to play with Suzuki and Caulfield. Rotating guys through there, nobody's sort of worked. You have to think Michkov or Leonard, both wingers, could have been that guy to play on that guy, be the third guy on that line, and what a number one line that would be.
Rick, final word on this Reinbacher.
I was going to say, it's everybody would love to get that offensive player that can make things happen. But obviously, the organization seems to be trending towards let's shore up the goaltending and the defensive situation. With when the opportunity is there, Reinbacher seems to fit that piece, and they're working the way out from the back, to make sure that they've got, as we all know, the defenseman being the smartest and the most critical part of your organization. Trying to get that in place with a long-term goal of real good players that are going to complement what they already have. So, like I said, we have to be a little patient. Maybe there is some disappointment, but let's give it some time, and we'll see the potential come into play, in the near future.
Well, Rick, we know you wouldn't trust Michkov or Leonard, right? Because never trusted.
Not for a second. No,
Gents,
I don't care how many goals he's scored.
I love stats, right?
No, he's not going to be. He's not going to be on the defensive side of the puck. That's for sure.
Gents, you guys know I love stats, right? So I did a little searching over here for the Habs draft. Since 2000, right, the Habs have taken 10 defensemen in the first round. So you take away Logan Mailloux because he's yet to play in a professional game for the Habs yet. The average number of games played by 9 defensemen taken in the first round since 2000, 76 games. So the bar is really low for Reinbacher to equal that number and become a great defenseman. And by the way, Mike Comstock played the most at 361. So we'll see what happens with his career. Still young. He just done his contract. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of years, if he's going to be with the club or not in the next few years. As for Alex Newhook, he was a big acquisition by the Montreal Canadiens. Your thoughts on this? He's a 2-time 13 goal scorer, a 2-time 30-point getter. Stu, you made that point on Twitter. He's part of the 2019 draft class, taken right behind Cole Caulfield. So was this a good move or bad move by the Montreal Canadiens to bring in Alex Newhook?
I'm of two minds on this move. I think on the one hand, I like the idea of taking a guy who is a high draft stock, who hasn't panned out with the team that got him. He's still relatively young. He has a little bit of a developmental pathway ahead of him still. And you put him in a situation where maybe he didn't get a chance in Colorado. And you look at Kirby Dach and what he did last year in Montreal, and it's enticing, right? Maybe this guy hits and he becomes a great player. However, if there was ever a year where he was going to break out, it should have been last year in Colorado, because it's not like he had to. He's a natural center, so it's not like he had to compete with guys like Suzuki and Dach to move up into the top 6. The guys he was competing with were JT Compher, who until last year has never been anywhere close to the top 6. Evan Rodriguez. Like, these are not great players in the NHL. The Colorado Avalanche had one center for most of last year who would have been a top 6 on 30 other teams. And that's, it's astonishing how good they were because of Nathan McKinnon being that center. But the rest of that lineup was extremely weak down the middle, and Newhook couldn't find a way to push himself up the lineup. Now, will he find a way now? St. Louis says he's probably going to play wing in the top 6. Maybe that's a different look for him. Maybe he'll find more success. But at the same time, I've read so many columns this summer about how the Canadiens internally are worried about how small they are, and they added another small forward here. So if I'm looking at how they made that decision in the draft, and if they decided that after acquiring Alex Newhook, they could no longer afford to take another small forward, and then passed on Matvei Michkov, then that combination of decisions is baffling to me, because you're taking a guy who might one day be at most probably a 50-point winger, and you're saying, well, because we have him, we now can't take this possibly 120-point Russian kid who could score 50, 60 goals in the NHL. So if that was the decision-making, which I'm not saying it necessarily was, but if it was, there's some big problems internally in where they're spending that capital of where can we afford small players. So that is a little bit troubling to me, but in terms of actual talent acquisition, I think it's fine. The picks that they spent on him make sense for an established NHLer who you think could do a lot more, even though it kind of sucks to lose those high picks in a year where you were tanking. But if he becomes better than any of the players who were taken between 31 and 37, I don't think anybody's going to be upset.
Well, size was the reasoning not to take Michkov, as you suggest there, Andrew. Ryan Leonard's 6 foot and 192 pounds, and he's 18 years old. He's going to be over 200 pounds by the time he fills out. So that would have, been the other option to go there. As I said, that would have probably been my pick at number 5. But I like the Newhook trade because Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are being very patient with this rebuild, but when they see an opportunity to maybe speed it up a little bit, like when they got Kirby Dach, they do. And this is a very similar trade. They give up a number 31 and number 37 overall pick. You don't know what you're going to get there. You don't know how long it's going to take for them to develop. And honestly, you don't know if they're ever going to play in the NHL. Instead, they've got a guy that they know. Kent Hughes was Newhook's agent, so he knows him well as a person. He said he's going to fit in really well in the locker room. He's ready to play in the NHL. He's 22 years old. He's got 159 games of NHL experience. He's got a Stanley Cup ring. Even though he didn't play a huge role in that, he knows what it's like to go through the playoffs and see a team win the Stanley Cup. He's got great speed. He fits into this type of hockey that Marty St. Louis wants to play. And as St. Louis said, he's going to get a better chair with the Canadiens. They're going to use him as a winger. I'm pretty sure he's going to be given an opportunity in the top 6. He's going to be able to play power play, he'll play PK. I think it's a smart move because you're getting a known quantity as opposed to two sort of unknown quantities at 31 and 37. And if Newhook works out, it does speed up the rebuild process a little bit. And now the Canadiens have 3 first-round picks from that 2019 draft. They got Dach, Caulfield, and now Newhouse. So if you had been going into the 2019 draft as a Canadiens fan and you were told you have 3 first-round picks, that's pretty good. And now they have 3 of those guys, 4 years and advanced in development. As you say, it's sort of Kirby Dach all over again. They're hoping that Marty St. Louis can have the same impact on Newhouse as what he had on Kirby Dach and what he had on Cole Caulfield. Remember, Cole Caulfield was not the same player before Marty St. Louis came in. He's got 48 goals in 83 games since Marty St. Louis became coach. So Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are banking on Marty St. Louis being able to have the same impact on Newhook. And I think he'll be able to do that. I think Newhook I can see him having a really good season. As I said, Kent Hughes knows him really well. I think he can fit in. He is another smaller forward, but he's not light. He's like around 190 pounds. He's sort of built like Suzuki with a big lower body. So I think it was a smart move. I think it speeds up the rebuild process a little bit. And as I said, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton being patient, but when there's a chance to speed it up a little bit, they're not afraid to do it.
And I don't mind the move. You talk about his size. 5'10", 190 pounder, 22 years old, and the way the game is played, it allows those guys to be able to do what they do best. And I mean, I don't know him very well, other than Ken Hughes, like Stu talked about, knows him, knows the type of character this kid is, and he's trying to bring him into an environment that is a good environment that will fit the mix and will bring what he can bring each and every night. And this guy, first rounder, has the tools, my understanding, to be a good player, and he's going to fit in the dressing room. He's going to fit in the type of atmosphere and the type of work ethic that the Canadiens are looking for in their rebuild. So let's see how this young man does coming into a pretty special group of guys. And again, time will tell, but I don't mind that move at all, and I'm not worried about his size. Being able to do the job.
It's not only 3 first-round picks from the same draft; it's 3 guys in the top 16. It's not like they're lower first-round picks. So we got 3 really talented players in Doc Caulfield and now with Newhook, and Marty St. Louis is able to bring out the talent in his players. I mean, for the other thing with Newhook, playing in Colorado, a team with won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago, looking to repeat again last year. They lost in the first round, but there's less allowance for errors when you're playing for that team than there will be for the Canadiens. So he'll have some more freedom to display his offensive skills. And as Marty St. Louis tells us, don't be afraid to make mistakes. You're going to learn from them. So it'll be a easier, I don't know if that's the right word, environment for him in Montreal. He'll be able to just go out and play his game without as much worry about that he would have had in Colorado. If I make a mistake, I might get bumped down, I might sit out, I might whatever. So I think it's really going to be a great opportunity for Alex Newhook. And now it's up to him to make the most out of it.
Who could be the right line mates for Newhook come training camp day 1 in late September?
I think what makes sense is sticking with Kirby Dach. I think the big thing that I heard from analysts who follow the Colorado Avalanche was that Newhook has trouble creating space for himself. This is kind of the big issue with his game. He's got speed, he's got skills, but when he gets caught in traffic, he just kind of gets stopped, and sometimes his decision-making is not quick. I mean, last year, what we saw, what's one of the biggest impacts that Kirby Dach has on the ice? He creates space for his line mates, whether that's by protecting the puck down low and forcing odd man situations, and then still finding a way to win the puck battles against 2 opponents, or just barreling towards the net and taking guys with him. He creates space. So if Newhook can play with that and get some open space, get some more shooting lanes for himself, get some more passing lanes, then maybe he breaks out. So that makes the most sense to me. I guess the question is who plays on the other side. And in an ideal world, you want it to be Slafkovsky, right? Because if he can actually take that step into the top 6 this year, score 20, 25 goals, I think everybody in the Canadiens organization is a lot happier than they were at the end of last season, and probably the fans as well.
And the fact Newhook can play center and wing gives him options. He gives St. Louis options, the same as he has with Dach. I mean, Dach looked really great when he played with Suzuki and Caulfield. I think they want him to be a center moving forward, but there's the option if they can't find anybody else to play with those 2 guys, you move Dach to the wing, you put Newhook at center, or vice versa. So again, that's another good thing. It gives Marty St. Louis a lot of, for a team. Remember when Mark Bergevin used to tell us, it's impossible to find centers. You can't find centers. Canadiens have a whole bunch of them right now that they can move from center to wing. That's one of the really interesting things about training camp is going to be to see who Marty St. Louis puts with his lines together. And I know when you mentioned Slafkovsky, Slafkovsky played really well last year when he was with Sean Monahan. And Monahan has that ability, like Dach, to create space for his teammates. Slafkovsky talked about how Monahan slowed the game down for him. And one of the problems with Slafkovsky is the game was moving too fast. It was so visible. So Monahan could slow it down, and Dach could do the same thing also. So there's an opportunity of maybe moving Slafkovsky from second, third line up and down to find a proper fit for him. But Marty St. Louis has a lot of options now when it comes to making his lines and who's at center and who's at wing.
Yeah, and they do
Rick,
have
thoughts
that
on
luxury. I was going to say they have that luxury of experimenting with the combination center or wing, and they'll see in camp with who can complement each other. I mean, the kid, scored 14 goals last year, so he's able to find a way, to put the puck in the net, and let's give him a chance to see, how he fits in, and then they can move him whichever way they want. They can complement and make a solid, three player line.
Well, to wrap up on this question here, 4 months ago, we were visualizing perhaps a Michkov, Connor Bedard, because that was the Florida Panther pick. The Panthers make the playoffs to go to the Cup run, ends up being number 31, so ends up being bench for Alex Newhook. So we went from Michkov and Connor Bedard to Alex Newhook. So we'll see what happens now with Newhook as they get ready for training camp in mid to late September. We'll see who he plays with. But right now, a lot of questions that need to be answered for the Montreal Canadiens. It'll be fascinating how this plays out for them going towards the fall. On to the final question with this week's show, gentlemen. Kent Hughes, Jeff Gorton, how would you rate their offseason with the draft and offseason acquisitions so far today, guys?
Well, the draft is the first time, I wrote a column saying it was a strange draft for the Canes. It's the first time since these guys took over that I sort of went, what are they doing? That was sort of my reaction, not drafting an offensive player with the number 5 pick when they had a chance, a team that struggled so much on offense, as we mentioned earlier. Taking 3 goalies in the same draft, I thought was a little bizarre. It just shows you that they have no faith in Caden Primo, and they're not certain about Samuel Montembeault. They want to have options going forward for whoever the goalie of the future might be, which is going to be 2 or 3 years down the road when Jake Allen's contract is over and Sam Montembeault either shows he can or can't be a number 1 goalie. I guess they wanted to stock up, but I just think it was strange to take 3. You think you might take a shot on a guy who could maybe be a goal scorer, or maybe not the greatest skater, but maybe he can get some offense. I just thought it was to take 3 in one draft. I thought was a little strange. But having said that, these guys have Gorton and Hughes and Marty St. Louis also. They have this long range view and plan for what they want to do. They're sticking to it. And we're going to find out moving forward. I mean, it's easy to knock draft picks now, but as I always tell people, go on one of the draft websites or whatever and look at the first round picks from year over year over year, and 80% of the guys you've never heard of. It's such a crapshoot. So, they believe in Reinbacher. I guess the 3 goalies, they wanted to stock up and make sure the cupboard was full for goalies. They have options moving forward. I understand why they don't think Caden Primo is the goalie of the future. He's shown that he can be a good AHL goalie, but not in the NHL. There's reasons he was a 7th round draft pick. And we've seen that when he gets to the NHL level. He'd have to clear waivers this season if they've sent him down to Laval. I don't know if somebody will take him or not, but there's a chance they lose him. So I understand their thinking. I just thought it was, as I said, it was strange. It's the first time since they've taken over that they've made moves that I went. Now, the other one was maybe when they hired Stefan Robida as a defense coach. I thought they'd want somebody with more experience on an NHL bench, but that has worked out well. Robida has been really good working with the young defenseman. But as with any draft and any trade, any offseason move, you got to come back in a couple of years and see who won it or whether it was a good move or not. But for me, the word strange was probably the best word to describe this offseason so far.
And I was actually quite surprised to see they were able to get Sean Monahan under contract and basically run the risk of, is this guy going to be healthy enough to get through the year? But Monahan said he wanted to be part of the Montreal Canadiens, wanted to, basically show that he could play, and they got him under contract. And when he was healthy, he was he complimented every line that he ended up playing with. So good for them. We'll see how that works out. But I think there's some unfinished business yet to be done as far as identifying some of their personnel that. Moving forward are going to fit in the organization. Armia, what's happening with Armia? I mean, do they have plans with him? Are they going to put him in and out of the lineup, making over $3 million a year? The salary cap, as far as they do have some room to work there. Are they going to? Is Hoffman going to come into the picture? Is Gallagher really in any of the conversations of a guy that they want to talk about and talk to him about? What he wants to do and, how they can accommodate if somebody's not happy. And one thing for sure with this group, management group, is they don't hesitate when it comes to what they think is the move to make the organization better and make the dressing room better. And I think there's more to come. And I think that some of these names that I just touched on will be in conversation, and some of these guys I would think are going to be changing locations, in the near future. Maybe not over the course of the summer, but they've got a plan in place, and they've identified the guys they want to have around. And I think there's going to be some more bodies that are going to get shuffled through, trying to save some salary, or bottom line is the guys that don't fit the long-term goal, which is what they're trying to build on.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from a lot of fans right now is that it hasn't been a sexy summer for the Montreal Canadiens. They haven't added a big name. They haven't added a lot of scoring. But if you look at each individual move that Hughes and Gordon have made outside of the late round draft picks, which frankly don't really mean much for right now anyway. You're looking at 5 years from now for some of those goaltenders. But you look at the Alex Newhook edition, you look at Raphael Harvey-Pinard signed for a very, very reasonable 2-year deal. You look at Sean Monahan coming back. You look at the Joel Edmondson trade. You look at David Reinbacher being added to the organization. And all of these are pretty positive. I think especially, and if you'll allow me, I'm going to get a little technical with you guys. I know that analytics isn't the thrust of the show, but there's an analytic out there called goals above replacement, which is essentially an attempt to evaluate what a player brings to a team overall in terms of goal differential relative to a replacement level player. So somebody who's not a full-time NHLer, right? And Edmondson last year was actually among the worst in the NHL by this metric. So alongside losing Edmondson's negative value on the ice, I know he has positive value in the locker room, cap space also has an intrinsic value or a potential value of goals above replacement in terms of what you can add. So when you combine the cap space that they saved and losing Edmondson off the roster, the Canadiens added, I think it's like just under 9 goals above replacement, which last year would have been their second best roster player after Kirby Dach in terms of goals above replacement, just above Nick Suzuki's impact. So that's pretty huge in a deal that looks like nothing. A lot of these little deals that they're making are surprisingly impactful. I do think they have a lot left to do before, midway through next season. Like, can they really afford to carry Christian Dvorak through another season? Can they really afford to bring Yoel Armia back and maybe keep a youngster out of the lineup for another year? I don't think so. They have to find ways to move those players, but the moves that they've done so far, I think, are still on the positive side of the ledger.
Yeah, just want to bring up a point with Edmondson, guys. The time of the trade, would this not have been better off if they held on to Edmondson and see the value go up, or maybe trade him on the draft day and use those picks now than wait until next year for those draft picks to come through?
No, because they need to open a spot for a young player. They're not going to, if Edmondson's coming back, they weren't going to make him a healthy scratch. You don't do that with a veteran. You don't do that with an assistant captain. You don't do that with a guy who's respected and loved so much in the locker room. If he was coming back, you got to play him. They don't want to play him. They wanted to open up a spot for him. I think it's one of those trades that makes sense for the Canadiens. It makes sense for the Capitals. Nobody was going to take his full salary with his back issues. I mean, he might play 5 games next year. His back might go out and he's done. That's a risk that Capitals are willing to take, not with the full salary, with half the salary. So the Canadiens save a little bit on salary cap money, dumping half his salary cap. They open a spot for the young defenseman, and that was the key. And, Rick, you mentioned Monahan. I wouldn't have touched Monahan if it was a 2-year deal. I wouldn't have touched him if it was like $3 million. But for just under $2 million, $2 million if he gets his bonus for playing 26 games, I think it's a smart move because he's really helped Juraj Slafkovsky. He was really liked in the room. He's a smart guy. If he can stay healthy, he'll be very effective. Whether he can is a huge question mark at this stage of his career. But for me, it made sense. And, Raphael Harvey-Pinard, nobody's taking Yoel Armia's contract. There's nobody. I mean, you don't know whether they send him to Laval, whether they try and buy him out, whether they make him a healthy scratch. He's at that point in his career. He is who he is. He'll look like a superstar for 2 games, and then he'll disappear for 2 months. Nobody's taking Gallagher's contract either. 4 more years at $6.5 million. But at least with Gallagher, you know what you're going to get. You know you're going to get full effort every night. And if he can stay healthy, I still think it's possible for Brendan Gallagher to score 20 goals. It's also possible for Raphael Harvey-Pinard to score 20 goals. If you combine their 2 contracts together, it's $7.5 million. If you can get 2 20-goal scorers for that price, that's not horrible. It's not great, but it's not horrible. So if Pinard can produce and Gallagher can produce and both of them can score close to 20 goals, it makes Gallagher's contract a little bit more digestible because he's overpaid. He was underpaid for so long. But Raphael Harvey-Pinard will be very underpaid if he can score 20 goals in the NHL.
I think Gallagher's earned every cent of that contract, but he should have been paid it the last contract.
Yeah, he was underpaid.
His contract should have just been flipped.
Yeah, 6 years ago.
And then it'll make more sense. But yeah, like you said, Stu, if Harvey-Pinard scores around 20, if Gallagher scores around 20, if Kirby Dach scores around 20, if Josh Anderson scores around 20, it's already a significantly better team than last year. Like that's just, there's no way around it. It would be a big difference if those players can stay healthy and score around 20 goals, and then you've got Caulfield around 40, Nick Suzuki around 25. There's a lot more offense in that lineup going into the first day of the season than last season. And hey, if Sean Monahan can throw 20 goals in there too, that's a huge, huge change from last year.
And the Edmonton,
there's a lot of ifs right now with the Montreal Canadiens and what they could be doing. Go ahead, Rick.
No, I was just saying the Edmondson move was one of hey, he's playing, he's somewhat healthy. You gotta get him to the next team while he is still playing and so-called healthy. But big concern about him with his back and the situation that's going to play out with his issue of really bad back. So, anyways, next move on and try and fine tune the group that you have.
Well, like I said before,
Hughes said that he had similar offers for Edmonton at the trade deadline last year, and they decided to keep him. They wanted him in the room. I mean, you can't. He was such a valuable guy in that locker room. He was a guy who had all the social stuff off the ice. The players really loved him. They really, really respected him. And I think Hughes thought, rather than letting him go at the trade deadline last year, it was better to keep him around, have him have that influence on the younger players through the end of the season, and then now move him up and ship him off to Washington. But I understand why they wanted to keep him through the end of last season. I also understand why they wanted to get rid of him in the summer.
Well, again, a lot of ifs right now for the Montreal Canadiens and what they will be looking like come training camp in late September, and what they will do with the likes of Monahan, Hoffman, Dvorak, and Armia and others who could be dealt by the time we talk about the deadline day next spring. So we'll find out what they do. But don't forget to submit your questions or comments here on Hockey Inside Out. We look forward to conversing about that on a future episode. And check out the YouTube page for all the latest episodes of Hockey Inside Out. And sign up for the newsletter at montrealgazette.com/newsletters. And for full content and bonus episodes, head on by Hockey Inside Out as well. On behalf of Rick, Stu, and Andrew, wish you a great summer. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.